Greetings and welcome to the Halloween edition of the Sliders Review. And I'm here today to talk to you about Halloween, the 1978 movie. This is the movie that pretty much started it all for the most part. It put greater emphasis on the final girl, even though the final girl has been depicted years prior in black and white movies and stuff. And there were tons of horror movies, but this was the slasher movie that pretty much started it all, in my opinion, and in the opinion of most others and stuff. It's the one who started the it's the one that put in the head of the urban legend myth of an escaped, a sane, like, patient going on a murderous spree and everything. It depicts the whole, like, sexualization of women in horror movies. This movie is what made Jamie Lee Curtis the star she is today. Just like how her mom was in horror movies back in the day with Psycho and that one Birds movie. And it's crazy how this came out before I was even born and stuff. And like how this movie is what started like the craze of like slasher movies and around like the 80s and stuff. And without like this, we probably never would have had things like Chucky or like Friday the 13th and Scream of all things. Scream is where I first got my reference of Halloween movie. They emphasize that a lot in the opening credits. Like, whatever her name, Drew Barrymore's character, Casey Becker. Like, she talked about how Halloween is like her favorite movie, and so I always had that reference in my mind of looking at the killer, the white mask, and the butcher knife type thing, the kitchen knife, and so like. And then of course towards like the end of the movie when Randy's explaining the rules and talking about like Jamie Lee Curtis was able to survive these like horror movies because like she remained like a virgin and everything, and it's the whole like don't give it up or you're gonna die type thing. And then I remember seeing like, they were watching part of the movie. Now those scenes that I saw makes more sense in my head because I never knew it. And of course I knew the theme music from like, the Scream movie and stuff. And Jamie Lee Curtis character Laurie is probably the most famous final girl of that era. And then of course Sidney Prescott became like the newest final girl, most famous one of like a new era and stuff. And a lot of people debate which one is better, because when it comes to other final girls, a lot of them don't really appear no more. Julie James don't appear no more. The ones from the urban legend movies don't appear no more. And a bunch of other movies like just don't appear no more. Either they died off screen or they're in an insane asylum or just got completely written off for like the sequel and stuff. But like Laurie and Sydney are the most famous final girls in any slasher movies and stuff. There would be no Scream without Halloween. And so I know a lot of you are saying, how can this be your first time watching it? Well, like I've said before when I talked about Scream, I never watched horror stuff back in the day. Not to mention this came out before I was born. But I never watched horror stuff back in the day growing up. I was more of a TV person, not a movie person. And like horror stuff just scared the crap out of me. It wasn't until Screams when I watched my first full like horror slashery type thing, and then I just fell in love with it after that. And back in those days, growing up in like the 90s and stuff, I just never rented it at like Blockbuster or nothing, and I never saw it on TV because it never came on. And so then as time passed, I just completely forgot about it. And then, like, with the newer movies coming out and stuff, it's like, oh, yeah, that. Well, I could never find it on streaming. I didn't want to pay for it. But I was able to find it for free on Redbox, the app. I completely forgot about that app until this other YouTuber talked about like getting rid of their like paid streaming sites and only doing the free ones. I'm all like, oh, I recognize some of those free ones. I have those. And I'm like, oh, Redbox. I forgot about Redbox and stuff. So thank you. I forget his name. Is it Bateman? The dude who likes anime a lot and Pokemon and stuff. And so, like, I went and got the app and I saw it on there. I'm like, okay, I'm finally gonna get to watch it. I'm finally gonna watch it, like the slasher movie that like pretty much started it all. And I'll give it up. It's a pretty good movie, a whole lot better than Halloween Kills. Because, like I said before, Halloween Kills was the very first Halloween movie I ever saw. And I particularly didn't care for that movie that much. A lot of stuff didn't make sense. I knew Michael Myers was like the killer, and I thought it was cool that the town people, grouped up and decided they're gonna get rid of Michael for once and for all. But they went after the wrong person, and it's kind of like, how did they go after the wrong person? They look completely different, especially in height and stuff like that. And so it was just an odd mob movie where people are just crazy, going in town, going after the wrong people, assuming this and that, while Michael's just going on a killing spree. And I will say, between Halloween and Halloween Kills, and Halloween Kills, the dude is just literally killing people for the sake of killing people, and sometimes in a comedic fashion and stuff. And it's kind of like, how is nobody able to get a blow off this guy? And it's just like he's just randomly walking around town killing folks. Now, I've never seen any of the other Halloween movies or the remake or nothing like that. But in the first movie, his kills aren't just as random can be. And the first time he starts killing is because it's necessary for him to get the stuff that he needs, like the car and like the clothes and stuff like that, and the Halloween mask and stuff like that. And then of course, like, he just starts stalking people. Now, one thing that always confused me is that I remember a while back I decided to read up on the Halloween movies on Wikipedia, but I didn't really pay that much attention to it. And so, like, when I watched Halloween Kills, I decided to reread up on it and pay attention this time. And so, well, you gotta be kidding me. That guy's playing his music loud again. I hope it doesn't get picked up on the audio. And so, I hate that guy. Anyway, so like, I thought Laurie and Michael were like related and stuff, because at some point, I think in the second movie, they talked about how they're related and in the reboots, but then when they retooled this entire thing, they dropped that continuity because this takes place directly after the first. Well, Halloween Kill takes place directly after the first. And so, like, not to mention, I think Danielle Harris, that's what I was going to say before I got interrupted by the music. Danielle Harris, her character is completely written out of like the newer movies because, they retconned all that. Now, she's wanting to come back, but they haven't brought her back because they retconned her out and stuff. And that's quite a shame because she took over when Jamie Lee Curtis left. And so, like, with this movie, it is that of a basic 70s movie. There's not much emphasis on like story or character development or build up, which is kind of standard for a horror movie. That's something I've already said. One reason why those TV shows don't do so well is because they focus too much on story and backstory and all the characters, where in horror and slasher movies, they only focus on like the main person and the killer. But in this movie, of course, the only person they can focus on is Michael themselves, but you don't get that much backstory into him. And of course, nobody knew Laurie was going to be the main protagonist when they watched like this movie, because the thing about Michael Myers is that he just randomly stalks women and babysitters and stuff. And, so nobody knew she was going to be like the main person until, of course, like the second movie and stuff like that. And then when the movies decided to come back 20 years later and stuff. And, so in that regards, it's kind of odd. Like, I'm watching this movie and I'm just like, there's no real true backstory on nobody. Like, because I assumed going into this, she was going to be like the main person, and we'll get some backstory into her. And her just being a high school girl who's really good and smart, and just like she's a babysitter, and that's literally it. Now, some people say that one thing that makes this movie so great is that it's just a rando dude stalking a bunch of rando people and then killing them. And that's so realistic. And that does bring the fear and tension in your heart and stuff. And because it's just a rando person just randomly stalking people and then randomly killing them as they stalk them and everything. And that's one of the most terrifying things ever. Who has never walked in their house in the middle of the night and turned on the lights and kind of been worried, could there be somebody behind me, This movie helps prey on that fear, and it works. However, it would be nice if he had an actual motive as to why he goes around doing what he does. I don't like that. That's never explained in this movie. It's never explained in Halloween Kills. Maybe it's explained in another movie, but I just don't know. And then some of the characters are just so wonky and just so two-dimensional and stuff. The sheriff's daughter, the kids being babysat. Even Laurie is just a two-dimensional character and stuff. The only person who seems even a little bit more interesting is that of Michael himself, and a little bit of Dr. Loomis, but Dr. Loomis doesn't really act like a doctor and stuff. And so, because the dude's carrying around a gun and going hunting for Michael and stuff, even the sheriff isn't really doing that. And so, I really need to see the second movie to see, if there's more emphasis on the characters and stuff. But all in all, it is freaky in this movie because he literally is just stalking people. But in a way, it's kind of comedic because nobody sees him stalking them. Like, he's literally showing up when people are looking for him and they leave off screen and then he shows up on screen. And, basically the thing about this movie is that when he was a little kid, it was Halloween. He was being babysat by, I think, like his sister. And she got through making out with like her boyfriend, and then when he left, like she went upstairs and she still is topless for whatever reason. This is the problem with Hollywood back in like the 70s and stuff, and the 80s. They emphasized a lot on like female nudity, which is why today in modern television and modern movies and mostly modern television, we get so much man naked booty and stuff. And I'm so sick and tired of seeing that. It's like the whole revenge thing of all these females randomly getting like nude back in movies when they had no business getting nude. But of course, these were made by horny men and stuff, and a bunch of horny men watch this. And now when I'm watching this, all this modern day slasher stuff makes sense when the female characters are talking about, oh, women were so sexually exploited back in the day and all this other stuff. And why do the crazy stalkery men always prey on these like women and stuff like that? And let's reverse the roles. And so now this stuff makes a lot more sense after watching this movie and stuff. It's like pretty much almost every female character is topless almost. Except for like two. And so like he just starts stabbing her, but the way it's all set up is interesting. He's just walking up the steps and we know it's a little kid by his hands and stuff, and then he picks up his little clown mask and we see through the eye hole of the mask, and it's very beautifully shot through like the eye holes, and then he's like stabbing his sister and stuff like that. But the question is, why is he doing this? Just like Billy Loomis said in Scream, sometimes things are more scary when there's no motive, and Mike Myers has no motive and everything. And so like he just randomly just kills people for whatever reason. He is very disturbed and evil. And so like after that, he was put in an insane asylum for 15 years. Dr. Loomis, talked to him and like, tried to help him and all this other stuff. So he knows all about him. Well, one day, Dr. Loomis and a nurse are like driving out to see him in an insane asylum, when all of a sudden things go wrong, and it's an escape, and a bunch of the patients are like fighting with the orderlies, and Michael escapes. We never see like his face, but he's able to like almost kill like the nurse, and he steals like the doctor's car, and the doctor is terrified. He knows that a psychopath is literally going to roam the streets, and he has a feeling he's going to head back home. Not sure why, but that's just, like I said, there's no real setup. And that's like always been one of those things that Michael always heads back home. That's what happened in Halloween Kills. Something always draws him back home for some bizarre reason, but it's never truly ever explained. And then, we get the setup with the characters. We get like Laurie and like her friend, like, and all these other people. And it's just random teenage stuff. And then we see Michael constantly, we see her run up to the boogeyman's house and everything. the scary house that Mike Myers used to live in, and he can see her running up to it. And I'm thinking to myself, is that why he's so fixated on her? Because the question is, why is he so fixated on Laurie? When she started appearing 20 years later in like the newer movies, it's like, why is she the main one he's always going after and stuff? And it made more sense in my eyes when they made it brother and sister, even though there's no emphasis on that in this first movie. It's kind of like the second movie retcon a couple of stuff, but it's like that made more sense and a more direct connection. He killed his first sister, okay, now he's gonna kill his other one and stuff. But then I think that's where the remake screws things up when they make it them two not related, because one, it was already continuity set up, and two, they had a bigger connection. So now it's just like he's just stalking this random woman and constantly going after her for whatever reason. And so like that's all he does in the entire movie. He's driving in the car, creeping around, following them. Nobody ever sees him. The Dr. Loomis talks to like the sheriff because there's been a break-in at like, you know, the Halloween store, and somebody stole like a mask, and the sheriff doesn't really seem to care that much, but the doctor is. He has a gun. What kind of doctor has a gun? But that's how terrified he is of Michael. But Michael's only killed one person prior to the events of him escaping. Then, you know, the doctor is the one doing I can't talk, detective work. And like, you know, it's cold. My mouth is chattering. And like, he sees that he killed like a worker and everything, stole like his uniform, and that's like his iconic uniform outfit he wears and stuff. And it's just the entire movie, he's just stalking random like girls and stuff like that. And every girl that ends up topless and making out with a dude and gives it up, they end up dead and stuff. And it is very terrifying knowing that like he just appears out the shadows and all you see is his white mask and stuff. The one that's based off of William Shatner's face. And then he just starts killing people. And then when Laurie goes to investigate, when her friend is being choked on the phone, here he is in all his glory chasing after her. And it's not even really a chase. She like when she's running, and Jamie Lee Curtis does a great job at screaming and running and like hollering and stuff like that. She was great at that. And you know, he's just like walking towards her as she's running, but he's able like, you know, to catch up. And that's the whole thing I remember. And I Know What You Did Last Summer, that takes emphasis from Halloween. They talk about in how mental patient like escapes from like a place and starts killing people, and you know, he's walking slowly towards people. This movie is what set all this stuff up for like, you know, future movies and stuff. And so like he chases her, but she's able to outsmart him, and she's able to like, you know, to like I think stab him with like a clothes hanger, which is weird, but whatever. And so then the doctor shows up randomly in this neighborhood. Not sure why, but it would be nice to explain. And then with his gun, he shoots Michael dead, and then it just literally ends and everything, you know. And the kids, she helped protect the kids as she was babysitting them and all this other stuff, and like, you know, it just literally just ends, and it's kind of like a flat ending almost, 'cause it just like goes away. But then in the next movie they decided, hey, you know what, this movie made a lot of money and a lot of people like it, let's make a sequel, but we have to have the killer come back. Oh, let's just say he rose from the dead and Michael just survived the gunshot. Literally, Michael Myers is just like a zombie almost. Like you cannot kill him. And he just goes on a killing spree. But for whatever reason, people love that with no real explanation to it. Maybe they explained it in Season of the Witch. Why is it called Season of the Witch? But whatever, you know what I'm saying? But it would be nice to have some meaning as to how he's able to survive all these bullet shots and stabbings and everything else and come back alive. But supposedly, you know, the only way, like Randy said, the only way you can kill like these killers in the movies is to chop their head off and mutilate their body. That wasn't that spooky. All right, well, I shall talk to y'all later. Bye.